Hey, I'm Sammy, and welcome to my world of winches. I had a question from a friend of mine who recently bought an AT74 on what the differences are between the upright winches, and I said, well, I've done a lot of research on it. I've talked to a lot of people about them. I've talked with another fellow winch nerd, Andy Lilienthal from Warren, quite often about this stuff and the history of these winches. I don't have dates, I don't have timelines, but I didn't understand the model differences. So I said, hey, let's make a video about it. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I have more than just the AT74 and the Belleview 6000. I've got a Ramsey worm drive, among other winches. I've also got a Warren M15000 that's not a upright winch. So, all right, let's talk about these winches. So shameless plug as I get started here. Custom Splice. I run all synthetic rope on all of my winches from Todd at Custom Splice. Literally, he's not paying me to say that. He has no idea I'm even doing this video, but if you need custom winch rope, Todd, Custom Splice. All right, so this winch here, this is a Ramsey. I think it's a 12,000 pounder. I don't know the model numbers, but it's a worm drive winch. What that means is instead of having a mechanical brake to stop the winch after you're done using it, to hold the load, it is actually a worm gear setup. So what that means is there's a motor perpendicular to the drive of the drum. That motor feeds a worm gear that feeds a worm wheel that goes through a reduction box then, which is then back to parallel with the shaft to a clutch setup. That clutch can engage or disengage your drum. Pull that clutch out or disengage the clutch, you can free spool, you can pull your rope out. When I rebuilt this one, I didn't have the right circlip. As you may know, when you pull a circlip off, it kind of goes into orbit. Mine certainly did. Went and saw one of my friends at Fastenal who has since passed away, Mark, miss you, man. And we probably put the wrong circlip on there. But no big deal, I'll get it fixed at some point, but that just means that right now my clutch is permanently engaged, so it's power in, power out only. Solid winches, nothing really wrong with them. They're not super heavy. It's kind of old school technology. From my understanding, Ramsey offered these an electric drive, power takeoff drive, as well as a hydraulic drive, hydraulic motor. The power takeoff ones are actually kind of neat. Ramsey had PTO winches for CJ5s and flat fenders and everything else. You would engage a power takeoff on a transfer case on the back side, send power up through the shaft, turn your winch drum that way. Disadvantages might include, well, if you bog down in a swamp and you flood your motor, you can't really pull yourself out because you kind of don't have a running motor. So all my winches are electric. I do have one power takeoff winch that actually goes on the back of this one. Somebody modified it, mounted on the back of another Jeep. I just haven't had a moment to put it on there or really any reason to because I don't wheel this Jeep. So there's that winch. All right, second winch up here. We've got a Belleview 6000. This is made by the Bellevue Manufacturing Company of Portland, Oregon. From my understanding, this is the original upright winch design engineered by Bellevue, rated to 6,000 pounds. It's an electric winch. It is a 12-volt motor, power in only, manual drum brake winch. So when I purchased this winch, it's actually kind of neat. It came with all of the original hardware, including the original owner's manual. So that was definitely a treasure to find. I'm sure some of the purists out there are going to say, well, you kind of ruined it because you welded tabs onto it for a light bar. And to that I say, huh, it's my winch, not yours. You don't want tabs on yours, don't put them on yours. So the way this winch would have operated is you wouldn't have had a solenoid, you would have had this mega switch to carry the current. You would put this on your bumper, and if you needed to winch, you would pull it out, make your contact. There was also a cable mounted to this. There's that component there. The other part of this winch is there's a manual clutch to disengage so you can free spool like every other winch, but you also have a manual drum brake right here. This cable for this, for the brake, for the clutch, and for the power would actually also run into the cab of the Jeep. I have that bracket somewhere that I don't know where it is because I probably would have had it out here for this video. But I am fairly certain, I haven't looked in this in a while, there it is. We do have an image of it in this owner's manual. So, we can get the old iPhone or Rooney here to focus. You would have had cables in the cab that ran down to your winch. So you can operate it from the inside your cab or at your front bumper. So this winch is power in only, like I said, although Brendan Metcalf does offer a two-way motor for these. I definitely recommend doing that. I plan to do it to mine if I actually needed to wheel and use my winch. For now, I'm just kind of holding off because, well, I have another child tomorrow, so I don't need that two-way motor right now. What else is there to mention about this? I make these winch plates for the Belleview 6000, 8000, or the Warren 8000, as well as the 8274s for flat fenders. This is a winch plate. I also have bumper options, so keep that in mind. To operate this winch, you engage your clutch, you power in, you hold it there. When you're done powering in, you hit the brake, you hold it. Downside to power in only is if you have to back off of it, you kind of have to like finagle the clutch and the brake, which gets really sticky, especially under load. I've tried it, I've done it, doesn't really work so well. Kind of a disadvantage of these winches. That's why Brendan's two-way motor is definitely a good, solid upgrade for these. For now, I run a Ford constant duty starter solenoid to power this winch. One solenoid I keep back up, and I have that wired to a Warren plug in the cab of the Jeep. So within that, I mean, it's just pretty robust, simple, rugged setup. Good winches can be had really cheap. If you don't need an 8274, if you're not wheeling constantly, if you just want, you know, classic old school styling, you can have these things for like $100. There's rebuild kits out there for them. Brendan has those motors. I have these winch plates. Definitely a good way to go. So here we have two examples of what the Belleview evolved into. Warren apparently bought the patents. I'm not sure, and I'm not entirely positive of the history there. If Belleview was going under, if Warren just wanted to add this upright winch to their lineup, exactly what happened. Warren had their summer hubs and their Warren overdrives for the Dane 18 at that point. Either way, they ended up with this. This is physically identical to a Bellevue 6000, but these are the Warren 8000. That means they're rated to 8,000 pounds. In theory, that Bellevue is also rated to 8,000 pounds, but Bellevue underrated those motors, underrated those winches. From my understanding, the components are all the same. They're interchangeable. There's just a couple differences. So, for example, this one here has a sticker. It says Warren Winch Series 8000, model number 5687. My understanding with talking with Andy is that this was the Warren Model 8000 winch, but this sticker says 5687. What does that mean? I don't know. Still trying to find that out myself. This winch I'm currently rebuilding, which is why it's torn apart, is an older one. Model number 8000, serial number blah blah blah, rated capacity 8000, made in USA by Warren, 12 volts, Seattle, Washington. Physically identical to the Bellevue. The motor is different. When I received this one with the sticker, it didn't have a motor on it, obviously, otherwise I would tell you what the motor looked like. So these are your Bellevue style Warren winches, is what guys will call them, or your Bellevue 6000s, your Warren 8000s, your Warren Bellevue. It's spelled B-E-L-L-E-V-I-E-W, kind of a pet peeve of mine. People are like B-E-L-U-E, and stuff like that. It's just kind of bizarre. So from there, these evolved into the Warren 8200. Now the 8200 was physically identical from your Warren winch here, your Bellevue style, except the only difference is it had an automatic brake on it. No more band brake wrapped around. Oops, let me just throw that. No more band brake that you had to physically operate to stop your winch, which is really convenient. I don't have one in my collection. If anyone out there knows where one is, I would love to have it in my collection. Definitely kind of winch nerd. Love having these. And then after that, in 1974, Warren kind of started fresh, started clean. Start with the 8274. Same general design of the upright winch, with your gear reduction going through a I guess you could call it a cascade. I'm not really sure. But let's go take a look at the 8274. All right, so that brings us to the next winch here, which is the Warren 8274. I also failed to mention that there was the Warren 6000 as well as the 8,000 pound upright winch. I'm not sure if that was an M6000, M8000, or just a Warn 6000, Warn 8000. Anyway, so in 1974, Warn took that design and totally redeveloped it. The only thing that this winch shares with its predecessor that you might be able to take off of an 8274 pot, put on a 8000, would be the winch rope or cable, as well as the contactor. Everything else is entirely different. Initially, they had a 2.5 horsepower motor. That was on your 8274 base models. Over time, they upgraded. I believe it went to a 4.5 horsepower motor, and now you can get them with a 6.5 horsepower motor. This is a 9.5 XP motor. This is 6.5 horsepower. I believe that when Warn had their anniversary edition with the contactor controller and the 9.5 XP motor on it, they rated it to 10,000 pounds, not 8,000. So 8274, what does that stand for? 8,000 pounds. 2, two-way, so bidirectional, in and out. 74, 1974. These winches have a date code on them. Mine is CF7. You can decode these. I know that the last digit is representative of 1987 or 77. Originally, this had a female plug on it, so this would have been an earlier winch, so 1977. This is a winch that was made in, I believe C is March, F is the A, B, C, D, E, F, 6th working day of the month, and 7 is 77. So March, whatever that day would have been, the 6th day, 1977. This winch has an automatic brake on it that is controlled by a camshaft. So when you put tension on this cable, if you're free spooling it in, you're not going to hear the brake work. It's just, this is all floating. It doesn't have any tension on it. But if you have tension on this cable, this inner disc is going to be pushed out into the outer disc. This inner disc is floating here on that cam setup. There's an inner disc, friction material, this ratcheting pawl setup, friction material, outer disc. There's also a pawl down here that's spring loaded. You got to keep it greased up. Under no load, you won't hear it. Under a load, you're going to hear that very nostalgic ratcheting sound. That's your automatic brake working. When you go to power out, that camshaft is just pushed in, so just motor takes over from there. What else is there to say about the A274? I remember my first time seeing one, a little nostalgia for you, in the off-road shop with my dad, who had an M8000 horizontal winch, not the vertical winch, and thinking it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. I learned more about them from JP, from reading about them in JP Magazine and Peterson's and all the magazines that are gone now. And thinking, wow, these are really, really cool. I ended up with this one, ended up with several more after that. I think I was up to 5 at one point. I think I'm down to 4. One of them ended up on a friend's Jeep. So, yes, Cynthia, if you have really nice friends, you get really nice presents. From there, so there's the A274, there's the A274-50, and the A274, there's that anniversary edition with the 9.5 XP motor. I believe that all the internals are the same, all the parts are the same. There's just like some styling differences, like this one's raw aluminum. There were some that are powder coated, like the charcoal gray color that Warn does. Jeep offered a special equipment edition, so instead of saying Warn winch, it said Jeep on it, and it was a Warn 8274. Those are actually kind of rare, and yeah, I'd love to have one of those in my collection too. There's also the Warn 8074, and I have one of those here. This is a winch that I've been assembling out of parts that I have left over. Neither of these winches have solenoids in them. They have contactors. These are all bright contactors. These are definitely the way to go. If you are into building any sort of like fast line speed winches, get with Todd, do some research on Gigglepin stuff. Gigglepin uses Albright controllers. Gigglepin also recommends your bow motors. I don't use bow motors. I have Warn motors on mine. I'm not really into the racing of winches, so I don't really have to build a super good at winch. But okay, so this one has a press slide motor on it. It's just what I have. There is no free spooling clutch. 8074. It's not a two-way winch. It's power in, power out only, but you can't clutch in. These can be had usually a little bit less than 8274s because guys kind of think they're inferior because you can free spool on them. I don't necessarily agree with that because these are insanely fast. They're not. I'm going to do idea for another video, just thought of this. I need to do a winch off between a 8274 with the 9.5 XP motor and the Bellevue. Because I think, if I remember correctly, the Bellevue actually has a higher ratio, therefore it's faster. I think. Doesn't mean it's more powerful because of gear ratios and, you know, math stuff, but anyway. So, 8274, 8074, pressed light motor, contactor controller, 9.5 XP motor, synthetic cable, automatic brakes. Bellevue didn't have automatic brakes. So visually they're similar in the fact that they're upright winches, but from there they're entirely different winches. So this is a Warren M15000. This is going to go on the back of the Unimog here. It has been sitting outside, unprotected, needs a freshening up. It's a newer winch. It has a contactor controller, which is a really nice feature on this winch. These winches, the motor goes straight through the drum, a shaft through the drum into a planetary gear set. You have a free spling clutch on this end, so we can disengage or engage. You can hear it engage there. And then there is a brake setup inside this drum here, so when there is tension put back on it, that brake tightens up, locks up inside this drum. Different from the 8274, from the 8200, from the 8000, from the Bellevue, from the Ramsey even, with the worm gear setup. Solid winches. Love the low profile winches in the right place at the right time. I'm just an 8274 geek and a Bellevue geek, so. But this is perfect packaging. It fits nicely. It'll fit nicely under the bed of the Unimog. Control stuff. So we talked about the ginormous switch that was on the Bellevue and the Warren style, manually operated on your bumper. From there we went to the solenoid pack. There's 4 solenoids in there. They shared the load. I believe it was 2 in, 2 out. This one's off of a 9.5 RC that caught on fire on my buddy's Ultra 4 car. It's been sitting in my parts box. I don't use solenoids anymore. I put Albright controllers in all of my stuff. These are weatherproof single unit that carry the load better, just an all-around general product. They don't fit perfectly underneath the Warren cover. There is one under this cover. You kind of have to stretch it. My friend Trevor of Crawlerado, CRAWLORADO, makes replacement covers for your solenoids for your Albright controllers. Really nice powder coat aluminum units, definitely worth looking into. From there, your remotes. So this is a new old stock, well, not new old stock, a used unit that Bobby Dickinson used to own until I bought it from his wife on Facebook Marketplace. You can use these on your, if you wire it correctly, you can use this on your Bellevue style winches with a Ford solenoid. You can use this on your 8274s, your M15000s, your M8000s, all your other, anything that takes a 5-pin remote, this will work on. I also have it wired in the fly fender that I can actually use a wireless remote on that Ford starter solenoid with the Bellevue winch. So, that being said, I'm horrible at public speaking. I'm sure I'm falling all over myself, and it's also like 100 degrees outside, so hope you enjoyed this video.